We're joined now by former Defence Secretary Penny Mordaunt. Penny, thank you very much for joining us. Now, just on the comments from Pete Hegseth, clearly directed at the United Kingdom, in your view, how would you describe the way Keir Starmer has behaved with regard to this particular conflict?
Well, I think what you're seeing is the difference between nations that are prepared to use their power and have clear objectives and an understanding of what is in their strategic interests, and nations which are still obsessed by process. And unfortunately, the UK seems to be in the latter camp at the moment. The most important thing is, having had the United States embark on this mission, that they are able to see it through. And what I worry about is the regime and its proxies will be trying to create as much pressure for the US to end this campaign early and leave part of the regime intact, not allow the Iranian people to step up and make this change. And I hope that the Prime Minister has enough guts to recognise that and resist that and enable the United States to complete its mission.
Now, of course, we've been speaking a lot about the British assets that are in the region. Our bases are incredibly important. But how is it that we actually have 0 Royal Navy destroyers in the region? Now, these can, of course, help intercept ballistic missiles when they're there, but our strategy, our perhaps Indo-Pacific tilt, has left a bit of a gap there in terms of naval assets in this region. Is this putting our own troops at risk?
Look, I have long argued, and many times on your channel, that we need to do much more to bolster our defences. And it's not enough just to have destroyers and aircraft carriers. Unless you have enough budget to provide spare parts, you end up with vessels which should be at sea being in dock in long refits. So we're not doing enough. Keir Starmer has said that we should be spending more on defence, but he's yet to do that. Our own defence chiefs have given us 4 years to modernise and transform our armed forces. We know we need to do that. The public know we need to do that. The Treasury doesn't start turning on the taps until year 5. So that's a disastrous situation. But what I would say is our armed forces still do an incredible job with the capabilities that they have. My thoughts are with them at the moment, particularly in Akrotiri, and they will do us proud, I'm sure, over the coming weeks.
Now, Penny, it was under your government's watch that the negotiations to kind of give away, as it were, at great cost to the taxpayer, Diego Garcia. How important is it that we keep that as a strategic base and not go through with the deal that Keir Starmer is proposing?
It's vital, and it's vital not just to us, but to our allies as well. The US not being able to use that base will have doubled the time their aircraft need to be in the air, putting air crews under additional pressure. This has been a running issue for many years. I do not believe that the current treaty, the wording in it, which goes into gratuitous detail to stop us carrying out pretty much every aspect of any military operation you would want to undertake. I don't think that was penned by my government. And I have been campaigning for many, many months here in the UK, but also in the US, to kill off this so-called deal. It would mean that we wouldn't be able to use our own contractors. We would have to share defence planning information. We couldn't put sensors or maritime installations in the water, and we would lose control over the electromagnetic spectrum, which is absolutely vital for communication. So if you set out to write a treaty that would prevent absolutely every single aspect of a military operation, it would be the one the government has arrived at.
Now, clearly, the Prime Minister did not get this whole operation off on the right foot. You can see that through his partial U-turn, bases now being allowed to be used, but for specific and limited purposes. I mean, is Britain doing enough to, frankly, keep our servicemen safe? And what would you suggest the Prime Minister do in the coming days and weeks?
Well, I would suggest he think long and hard about what his job is and the responsibilities he has. I looked at those initial two statements from the Prime Minister, and I was trying to figure out what was driving this. And I'm afraid the conclusion I have come to is that it is more about a message he wants to send to his backbenchers than it is a message to our foes and our closest friends and allies. In any operation, even if we're doing an operation alongside the US, there will still be particular tasks within that that we choose not to do or that we volunteer for. And that's because we have different targeting policies, we have different capabilities, and so you will always have those judgments. But in this, the UK was always going to have to be adopting, at the very least, a defensive posture. We were going to have planes in the sky. We were going to be wanting to protect our own interests and, most likely, interests of our allies in the region. I don't see why, apart from sending a message to your backbenchers, the Prime Minister made such an issue about the uses of these bases. I think it was unnecessary, and I think that's why he did it. And I'm afraid it has sent a terrible message back to our friends in the US at a time when we're trying to convince them that their investments in NATO and European bases are good value and should continue.
How much damage, Penny, do you think this has done to the so-called special relationship that we have enjoyed for many years, many decades with the United States?
I think the special relationship is still very strong. I see it in our military. I see it in our businesses. I think the special relationship is alive and well and will continue to do so. But I'm afraid the Prime Minister, because he is weak at home, is weak on the international stage too. And that I hate to see for the UK. And Keir Starmer either needs to find a backbone and find the guts he needs to do this job that he's stepped up to do, or he needs to clear off.
Strong words indeed. Penny, before we let you go, I've got to ask about international markets and particularly the price of oil and gas. A lot of people at home are going to be very, very worried about what this means, not just for the cost of filling up their car, but actually, frankly, for the economic security of this country, for inflation in the short, medium and indeed long term too. Just how significant is the Strait of Hormuz that we keep hearing so much about? Qatar in particular for their LNG production. This is a really, really stark future the world is staring at.
Look, I think one thing I would say is we need to get this in perspective. This is clearly something very serious that is going on now, and insurers will be wanting shipping, to not pass through the straits. That's very understandable. But these straits are under attack all the time. The average number of attacks that Iran makes on an annual basis against shipping with a British interest involved is about 500 attacks a year. So this has always been a very hot part of the world in that respect. Clearly, there is going to be a knock-on effect both on oil prices, but also other logistics as well, and also an impact on illicit oil too, which we shouldn't forget. What I would say to people who I know were already thinking about this at the weekend, I saw it in petrol stations in my own local area, is that it's what I said at the outset. Having embarked on this, the US has to see it through. And even if life becomes difficult, we must deal with that, because the consequences of wounding this regime are going to be horrific. It's going to mean, I think, potentially mass murder of its own citizens. We must do a good job in keeping those straits open. The port of Jaffa, which was on your television screens at the weekend, we have a lot of British assets there that are focused on that maritime security piece. And that is something that Britain can do to really help this situation, is use our expertise and intelligence to keep shipping routes open.
All right, Penny Mordaunt, thank you very much. Really good to talk to you. She's the former Defence Secretary. Thank you very much, Penny.